Hello, everybody. Intuition here. Thank you, as always, for making time and space for us. Today, we would like to discuss healing your traumas. Many of the issues in which we all face come from our traumas that are triggered by familiar circumstances and situations that we find ourselves in the present moment, that launch us back into a memory of the past that then yields us powerless and overwhelmed by a feeling that does not allow us to see the reality of now and the safety that we are in the present moment, because again, we are time traveling to a moment in our past where we didn't feel such a sense of safety. Many of our traumas and triggers are based, yes, in feelings of sadness and feelings of anger, but those feelings generally surround the idea that in that moment in which I'm feeling triggered by from my past, I didn't feel safe, or the people that were supposed to keep me safe did not. And so the first thing that is important to understand when healing, and then therefore being able to release and let go some of these memories of the past that keep us stuck in the present moment, is the idea that these traumas are generally centered again around a lack of safety within myself or with others around me, that then therefore elicit this feeling of sadness, this feeling of anger, this feeling of powerlessness. So keeping that in the forefront of your mind when starting to process, when starting to heal some of these triggers, traumas, and issues. And so, moving ahead beyond that thought, it is also important to understand that sitting and thinking and reliving an experience, a memory of the past in which there is trauma, only takes you so far. Because if you sit and relive that memory of the past, and you work through that and process it, you are only really receiving an intellectualized understanding and competency with regards to the challenge in which you faced back in the day. And though, again, that is very important to have more of an intellectualized understanding that yields more closure, because you are no longer looking at that experience through the lens of the past, through the lens of that child, through the lens of that younger aspect version of yourself. You are now able to resource it in the person that you are now. And because you are a different person now than you were then, you will have more of a comprehensive understanding of the events that led up to that traumatic event taking place for you. That is just one layer of understanding, because you are not just your mind. Your body also has a say in that trauma in which has taken place. And if you're only addressing an intellectualized story, then you are not also addressing the body that also took place and participated in that event in which you are traumatized by, because there was a physiological response that accompanied that intellectual response that occurred. And so if you are only simply just processing the intellectual need to understand the trauma that happened, you're not also giving credence to the body and how the body had to respond, and how the body is holding that memory in a different way than the way in which your mind is holding that memory. And so working again with processing the trauma that has happened is wonderful and encouraged. But many of us will sit and process, ruminate, relive, reimagine that trauma that happened over and over and over again. And that progress of healing that issue doesn't completely heal. It only takes us so far. So when we've gone as far as we can in intellectualizing and processing that trauma, then it is also time to start addressing the physiological trauma, physiological residue that has been left through that traumatic event. And we do that by going into the body in the sense of you don't feel feelings in your mind, you feel feelings in the body. If you think about it, you don't feel sadness usually in your brain. You feel sadness in your chest, in your heart, maybe in your stomach. And so part of processing that trauma is to bring it up intellectually in your mind. And once it is brought up in the mind, you go into the body and start feeling where the body is becoming reactive. And it is not enough to just simply say, all right, well, I feel sad and my chest aches and that's why I know I feel sad and that's it. I guess I processed the whole thing. It is the process of actually sitting with it and being curious enough to explore that uncomfortability in which your body is holding and has been holding for you since the trauma occurred. Because just like the memory of that trauma is stored in the brain, there's a physiological memory that is also stored in the body. And so you work with that physiological memory by sitting with that uncomfortable feeling that is occurring in the body and really being curious and exploring it. All right, I feel a pressure in my chest. I think that this is sadness, but let me really explore it. What does that sadness feel like? All right, it feels like a pressure in my chest. And what does that pressure feel like? Does it feel like something is squeezing? Does it feel like I'm being suffocated? If I sit with that, and I continue to sit with that, what does that suffocation move into? Does it release a little bit, or does it get worse? And simply being okay with being uncomfortable and knowing at any time that this is just a memory, that this is not going to kill us in the sense of many of us run from uncomfortable feelings because if you get down to the crux of it, there's this idea that it's going to overwhelm me, overtake me, and I'm not going to be able to come out on the other side of it. So knowing and understanding that this is not going to overtake you, that it may be overwhelming, but you are resourced within yourself to move in it or move out of it at your own discretion. And usually when you sit with this feeling that is occurring in your body, and you're okay with feeling the uncomfortability, reminding yourself again that this is just a memory and not taking place again. I'm not reliving it. I'm allowing there to be a release, a physiological release for this aspect of trauma that has been stored within my cellular memory, just like I was able to allow for there to be a mental release by processing this trauma. Once I sit with that, what happens is usually that feeling that felt so overwhelming completely releases itself and you are left with clarity, different from a mental clarity. Clarity in the sense of there has been no longer, we will say that your body has been holding on to this trauma. And if you hold on to something and then finally let it go, there's a relief in that release. And so your body has been holding on to this for you for a very long time. And if you sit with this uncomfortable feeling, eventually it is released and there is a relief, because there has been a block that has been unblocked by your desire to work with it in a different way, as opposed to simply repressing it and acting as if it is not there, and only allowing for there to be a mental release by processing the trauma intellectually, as opposed to allowing for there to be a physiological release that completely lifts the trauma up and out, so that you could come into a place of complete neutrality, both physiologically and mentally. Whereas before, all you were really able to receive is a half-assed closure, because you only have been able to process intellectually the trauma. And again, as if, since you are not just a brain walking around, it is a brain connected to a body, it is important to have a complete release, physiological and mental, which allows for you to have the closure that you are so deserving of, so that you are able to live your life unencumbered by the baggage that trauma ultimately has on you. And so, as always, this is just a little food for thought, a possibility for you to release yourself from that in which has been holding you back, because trauma is heavy, and you can't run or get to the places in which you are desiring to go as quickly if there is a big, heavy backpack on your back that you've been toting around, which is your trauma. So, we wish you well sorting through some of that trauma and having an additional tool in your toolkit that may help to completely free you from the chains of the past that is your trauma. Well wishes and good luck, and as always, thank you for making time and space for us.